So again, if you're just tuning in, just a snapshot here of what's going to go on today. We're going to do these budget walkthroughs, but we actually get to see a longer evolution with today's video because I'm actually going to be showing you my personal, like our personal household budgets over time and what has happened as a result of how we used to budget versus how we budget now. And you're just going to see me kind of critique some of the older ones. I'll talk through what milestones we reached. And so that's like a deeper dive. You're able to see a longer stretch of time with budgeting and what it can do. All right, so starting with September 2018. All right, so this is it. This is the September 2018 budget for our household. For some context here, September 2018, at this point, my husband and I were both in the military. We were Air Force officers, and by September, we had an 8-month-old son. So we've got a baby, we're both in the military. We were budgeting by paycheck, which is something that you see me demonstrate every time with these. And that is how I coach to budget, is by paycheck. So this would have covered September 1st through the 15th back in 2018. And I've got our income at the top, and then just this list, right? This is like, when I tell you this is unedited and just, I like pulled it up from the archives. We have just this list of things. So right away, my critique of this, and if I could go back and if I were to do things differently, there's no prioritization inside of this budget. There really is no rhyme or reason to what is happening. And some things jump out at me here. We have this investment for our son. Okay, we set up a UTMA for him when he was 6 months old, and we started investing into it. And I see this line coming out from this paycheck, and then I see this credit card payment of $250. And so what's not really adding up for me here is like, why are we investing for him when we have credit card debt to tackle? Okay, and I went back to my debt tables and could see like we had pretty bad credit card debt at that point, but yet somehow we're investing for our son. So that's not quite the order in which we want to do things. So that jumped out at me too. But above all else, there's just not a lot of rhyme or reason to what's going on. And then also look at this. We have this list, and then we have remaining at the bottom, and there's like, it's just kind of like, what is that? What are we doing with that remaining? But I can tell you, because I can slightly remember kind of where we were at this point and how we were approaching our money. It was really just like, what are the obligations? And then what's left? Yay. Right? Like that, it's just whatever we want. It can be whatever we want. I noticed like dining out isn't on here. So I imagine this 600 may have just been my way of saying, well, how much do we have left to spend on like play money and dining out? But it's brief, which is fine. There's not a lot to it. That's fine. But there's no order to it. We're investing for our son while we're also tackling credit card debt, which that's a misprioritization of things. And we're not giving every dollar a drop. So seeing some issues here. All right. So let me bring us forward to, and there's a lot here, but maybe I'll get some index cards so you can, don't worry about like reading every little line. We're just going to get the high points of what's going on. May of 2019. So we fast forward to May of 2019. We're both still in the military. Our son at this point is like 17 months old. And notice the budget looks different. There is an actual column in this budget where I'm saying, what did we actually do with the money, which is great. I could not find anywhere with this older one where I was actually tracking expenses or tracking spending. Like it does not exist. So this was the budget. Like this was end to end. It was just this list. We get a little bit better going into 2019. And now I'm actually tracking what we're spending. So that's great. We're still budgeting by paycheck. Wonderful. Here are some quick figures. Sharpie here. May of 2019. So across that month, income was 12,981, okay, for May of 2019. And we were investing. So at this point, we have now set up 401k equivalents, okay? When you're in the military, they're called TSPs. That's the 401k equivalent for the position that we had. And we were investing 1292, and I'm using like all these numbers combined. Okay, his investments, my investments going into our TSPs, which are those retirement accounts. So our savings rate, or really what it should be called is investing rate, was just under 10%. Okay, that's not bad. So we're starting to piece together some good things. Just a few months after this budget, we were going to be going to Europe, like a big trip to Europe that was going to be quite pricey. So we'd been aggressively saving. We were doing some good things. Okay, this is not to say that in 2019 we were just completely off, just like off the rails. That's not true. But I mentioned that this is really to critique and pass on some of my lessons learned so that you don't have to go through that growing pain. When we look at dining out spending in May of 2019, it's honestly embarrassing. $973 in just dining out for the month of May 2019. That's where we were. Groceries were $788. Again, it's my husband, it's me, and it's our toddler at this point in the budget. And we're talking over $1,600, almost $1,700 in food spending at this point. Okay, this just sheds light on our journey and some things that we really had to fix in order to get from basically spenders to not only savers, but wealth builders. Okay? So this was a huge issue back at the point of this budget. Another thing, what you guys will see me do, if you've seen me walk through full budgets and it's for couples, at the bottom of the budget, I like to see that each person, each spouse is getting like personal spending money, if that's possible in the budget. And back then I called these hubby and wifey funds. So I'll use that same language, but hubby funds at this point were $854. For some reason it was different for me. I usually try to make these equal, but we're still going to get the point across here. Like, this is a lot of money for each of us to have just for personal spending in May of 2019. Okay, so we're starting to paint a picture. We're getting ready to go to Europe. We've got money saved. Like, we're doing a little bit of good stuff, but we have a serious issue with food spending back then. And there was no need to be putting this much into personal spending for each of us. Okay, so there's May of 2019. Let me forward us a couple months to September of 2019. With this one, what are some takeaways from this one? We were still investing about 10%. Okay, but dining out spending got worse. I'll just summarize all this together. $1,221 for dining out and groceries at $805 for September 2019. So $2,000 for just like a little baby family of 3. It was bad. It gets worse. The hubby and wifey funds, the split that went to each of us in September of 2019 was $1,876. For why? What? Like, and when I tell you, like, we have nothing to show for that, I cannot point to anything. Okay, I take that back. My husband has Magic the Gathering cards that in some ways have served as a little bit of an investment. But like, on my end, I have nothing to show for this. Like, what was I doing with almost $1,900 in September 2019 for personal spending? Here's what ended up happening is because we split so much after all of our needs were met, it's almost like we created expensive hobbies for ourselves. I know that was the case for me. It was, now I'm going to start getting extensions. I'm going to shop a lot more. Like, the money's there. Like, I'm just going to go and do these things. Egregious in these areas of food and personal spending. Okay, so hopefully we're painting a picture here. You don't need to focus on line by line, but like, yes, in 2019, we were budgeting. I was tracking what was actually going out. Cool. But again, we have this issue of like, where's the prioritization? Okay, and what are we doing at the bottom? It's clear that it's just like cover the bills and then like split what's left. So that's where we were then. 2020 was an inflection point for us, most definitely. Had to grab more index cards here. So January 2020, I take note of the fact that our food spending is just outrageous, awful, embarrassing at that point. And I start to use cash envelopes, and food spending, more specifically dining out spending, becomes a cash envelope. That was huge for us. And I, for the longest time, was like, no, cash envelopes, like they're for, like that's like penny pinching, and like, you know, like those are the people who use coupons and da-da-da-da. But honestly, if somebody asked me, like, how did you get your dining out spending cut in half back then from like $2,000 a month down to $1,000 across dining out and groceries? It was because of cash envelopes. So that was something that changed in January 2020. Another thing is we had a career change. So at the end of January of 2020, I medically retired from the Air Force, and I did not have a job between January and July. So like there's a significant life change here that happened at the start of 2020. And you can see like we kind of budgeted in the same way. Okay, just make sure it's all listed out. There's really no order to it, but let's get it listed out. This is how I budgeted back then. And we've got this career shift. I was also pregnant, so we had my daughter in May of 2020. So just to kind of give context of like what was going on. Let me see if I have April. Okay, so now I'm gonna switch us over to the spreadsheet side, because what I started to do in 2020, some of you that have been with me, this is gonna look familiar. April 20, here it is. I gotta turn this light off. Okay. I started to use, so this is the 8-part budget, but 2020 edition. It looked a little bit different back then. It was actually called the money mantra, but the concept was the same. Prioritization of our funds and making sure that we were getting after things in the right order, okay? So I'm just trying to figure out just how I should show you this. But this was April of 2020. We had like these ordered sections, okay? Expenses, emergency fund, debt, all right? This is what I teach with the 8-part budget, and I just swear by it because it gives you a step-by-step. It gives you your stepping stones, like what should I be thinking about next? You don't have to guess at what to do next. It's there for you. So if this is April 2020, what do we have going on here? So 10% savings rate, we're still at that point, but I mentioned there was a career change in January. So by April 2020, our monthly income, it did go down, obviously, because I stopped working. Here was our income in April of 2020. But we still managed to invest $885. So we were still doing about 10% savings rate. So this is a good thing. Our income went down, and we actually ended up kind of sticking at our investing levels that we were at before. So this was I appreciated when I looked back and kind of went into the archives of our journey, our transformation. This was something that was nice to see. Our dining out spending was down to about $1,000 a month instead of $2,000. Okay, thanks to cash envelopes. And we kind of, like I said, we were using some savings, some maternity leave savings that I had built up so that that era while I was going to be not working, that we would be able to get through it. So there's April 2020. So we're kind of working our way through. We've made some good changes. We took note of really bad food spending, took action, implemented cash envelopes. It really helped us build our discipline. Now let's go into October of that year, and I'll show you a couple things from that. October 2020. Again, so we're now using the system that's prioritized. It's more comprehensive. With October 2020, our income was pretty high, but we dialed back on our investing. We went down to a 7% savings rate. So again, context helps. We were starting to save for a down payment for a house. All right. By this point, we had invested $50K by October 2020. And mind you, we started investing July of 2018. So from July of 2018 to October 2020, our portfolio grew from literally 0 to $50K. Okay, so we got a win there. Hubby and wifey funds were a lot more reasonable at this point. We were saving for a house. Okay, not a whole lot of criticism there, but we were investing less. And like we didn't have to do that. At this point, I was teaching at a high school. I was getting veteran benefits. So income was like back to more what we were used to, but still we had dialed back on it. So just something to kind of make note of. So in 2021, now we're going to flash forward a whole year. Notice it's still it's like this older version of the 8-part budget. This is when I took the business full time, was October 2021. The business was called Beautiful Budget. That's what we were before we were Ray Michelle Planners. Beautiful Budget. I took it full time, and income was fantastic. Okay. So we did look at that and say we should be investing more, and we made that happen. So we went up to 14% savings rate by October 2021. We had $20,000 for a home down payment, and our portfolio by then had grown to $103,000. Okay, so I know I'm throwing a lot of stuff out. So let me kind of summarize this. We started investing in July of 2018 is when we started. October of 2020, we had reached $53K invested. I'm going to show this in just a second. And then I'm showing you October 2021 now, $103K invested. So this is the power of taking a look at your numbers and committing to investing. Our investing kind of ebbed and flowed through these life changes of like career changes and having children and buying a house. But I did keep looking at it and trying to determine what can we reasonably do. And having a prioritized budget was crucial to making that happen, so that I could look at, once all of our, expenses are covered, what can we comfortably do? Expenses being that first block, and then moving into emergency fund contributions, making sure that we're nurturing that. Investing. Okay, we didn't have high interest debt at this point. I haven't been talking about that on this, but that's because we crushed our credit card debt very early after getting married in 2017. So that wasn't something that carried through over the last few years. So we were able to jump into retirement/savings. Like, stark difference from this guy. Like, that's what I'm really trying to highlight, is to just list things out. And like, okay, cool. Like, we're doing some good things, like investing for our son and we made an extra credit card payment. But there's no, what order should these goals be tackled in? Savings are not all created equal. Emergency fund is the most important savings bucket. And then those other savings efforts come later. So to have just one big savings block in your budget is not quite going to do it. That's not how we want to approach it. Making sure that you're investing for your future, right? You and your spouse, or just you if you budget alone, before investing for a child. So I look at this and I immediately, and you heard me earlier on the call, kind of critiqued that it needed to be prioritized. So to go forward effectively 3 years, okay, almost exactly 3 years, and now there's a system that puts things in order and makes sure that we're getting after things in the right order. And forgive me because I have not watched the comment block at all. If you guys have questions as we get going, please stop me, and I'll try to do better about looking at that to capture questions. But that's what I wanted to, that's what I'm trying to do here on this call with Millionaire in the Making, is a longer evolution and showing you the way our budget has changed over time and why that matters. Okay. Yeah, drop your questions if you have them. I'm kind of just getting my papers organized here before I show you the next one. So we're in late 2021 at this point. We've got 2 kids, we're homeowners, we've grown our portfolio to 6 figures, we're doing some good things. And then we shift into 2022. And then here is where, I'm going to put this back on the screen. Here is where, here's a big, let me just put it this way. Here's a big lesson learned for me with, you're following the 8-part budget, you're doing things in a sound order, you're living a well-balanced life. Sometimes you look at the numbers and you realize, oh wow, we really favored some of the more superfluous spending, like maybe travel. And it starts to, it adds up very quickly. So what am I talking about? So in 2022, let me just do this. In 2022, income was at about 200K. And here's what honestly, it infuriated me. I was so confused, and I just didn't know what I was looking at. I thought it could not be right. We only invested 35K, which is what this table is. This is the dashboard of, again, prior version of the 8-part budget template. It's not the newest one that I carry, but it is the same system, has the same tables. Okay, we're starting to get into, this is almost exactly what you see if you were to get the current Google Sheet, but only invested 35K. And I just thought, that can't be right. That can't be right. I remember hitting June, July and going, if you look month by month, our investing, it wasn't always the exact same figures every time. Okay, I would encourage you, it doesn't have to be the exact same figures every time. A lot of times it won't be, because life is coming at us and things are happening and we're traveling. So here's what I started doing in 2022. I literally wrote it here in my goals box. I said, why didn't we invest more? And then I said, well, let me go through all the budgets and look at those unique things that we purchased or unique trips that we took. It must be to a great extent, because we should have invested at least 50K. $30,000 I was able to kind of view throughout the year, and I put it all together in this table so that when I come back and look at my 2022 figures, it's a reminder of if you're not really keeping up with the extra in your budget, those blocks 7 and 8, really, it can get to where, it's $30,000 in a year is what happened. So a lot of this was home stuff, right? So getting furniture for the house that we had purchased in 2021. We needed a fence. Okay, the house did not come with a fence. But like Lily's birthday, $1,400. We also got a washer and dryer. So I don't mean to say that it was all just like fun spending, because that's clearly not the case. But Tuscany was $5,000. So what am I getting at here? To give yourself really good notes, future you will be so thankful. Because I mean, look, we're in 2024 and I'm like digging through old stuff and I'm figuring out like, what has our journey looked like? What could we do better? I can tell you right now, our food spending has kind of worked its way back up to like danger zones. Like we need to get a better handle on it. I might just do cash envelopes for 3 months so that we can like whip that back into shape. But it's been a good exercise, truthfully, to go back and be like, what was going on? But when I go back to 2018, like this is what I get. What does this, I mean, there was no expense tracking. There was no, again, no order to this. It's just a list. And like, what in the world with that extra 600? I don't know. So going into 2022, my methodologies were more about, or my habits were more about like leaving really good notes and trying to tell a story. And that helped me going into 2023 to try and look out for this more. Right? Because yeah, if we hadn't done a lot of this stuff, we could have invested $50K. Right? I mean, my husband, like, I go to my husband sometimes with a spreadsheet and I tell him we've invested X amount this year so far, or our average dining out spending per week is this. All of that is being pulled from my dashboard. And he'll even do the same thing where he'll go, wait, what? We only invested how much? And thankfully I can point him to the notes and be like, this is what we've been doing. This is what happened. All right. So that's really what I wanted to pull from 2022, was just capturing that sometimes it kind of gets away from you, all those other things that you buy. But here's the thing, it was very similar in 2023. Let's see, 2023, actually income went up. Okay, income went up. I'm just kind of bearing all in today's call, I guess. I'm showing you guys real numbers here, and this is what we invested. Again, that just like, that's unsettling for me, because shouldn't it be more? Now, mind you, I am always, I would say at least once a quarter, but it's honestly more often than that, going to like retirement projections and making sure that we're still on track to retire circa like 50. Right? So it's not lost on me that like this is still a lot for to invest per month. Okay, like of course it's relative. It's based on like, what do you earn? Is it you and your spouse? Like what are you, we all have a different story. It's not lost on me that this is a good chunk of money to be investing, per month or over the course of a year. But it should align with what your goals are. It should align with what your goals are, and determining what that is should shape your investing habits. So I did the same thing in 2023 where I said, all right, what were those unique expenses that made it to where our investing dollars weren't higher? There was a very pricey trip to Hawaii with the kids that we took to visit some of my in-laws. So that was a big one. Furnishing, right? When I look at these, I'm like, yeah, man. But when it's July and you buy the couches, it just kind of feels like, okay. And then you move on. But gosh, you get to the end of the year and you put it all together and you realize maybe it got away from you. So those are, when I look at 2022 and 2023, those are the big lessons of, am I okay with how things have gone? Now I look at this and I don't say to myself, gosh, I regret that. I wish we hadn't gotten the couches. I wish we didn't go to Hawaii. I make sure Is that in alignment with what I want? What we want? Our definition of wealth? What does that entail? Yeah, Rob Sawyer says, damn, 18K. Yeah, it was, we did Hawaii, basically. Like, we did it, and we probably won't ever do it again. Like, we did Hawaii. I look at this and I say, this is in alignment with what we value. Having over half of this like extraneous stuff be the trip to Hawaii with the kids, making memories with the kids is high priority for us. That is a big part of what I call our fulfillment portfolio. You have your investment portfolio that has stuff in it that makes you wealthy, but your fulfillment portfolio has stuff in it that makes you happy. So is that travel? Is it that you want to buy a house on 5 acres and, have some animals and whatever the case? Is it visiting a new country every year? Is it getting 2, 3, 5 degrees? Like it looks different for each of us. But that's where we want to get, is to the point where when we're starting to look at the dashboards and the data, we can see that it's in alignment with what we value. All right, sorry, let me just scroll through. I think I saw a question earlier about credit cards, so I'm trying to get back to it. How do you decide how much to put towards CC debt? So with credit cards so commonly being such high interest, 21%, 25%, as much as possible after needs are met, as much as possible, but keeping in mind, how should I show this to you? Keeping in mind, now I'm going to take you to right now. Give me just a second. I got to find it's under a different email. This guy. Mind you, there's a block to pay attention to before that. So I'm just going to walk us through. This is the most current version of my Google Sheet. This is what we currently budget in. For some reason, it's taken a while to load. But there's a block between expenses and extra debt payments, and that block is your emergency fund. So like November, I've already built out for us, so I can show you the expenses block here is going to capture obviously bills. Okay, those things that have a due date, right? Minimum debt payments, daycare, stuff like that. Then you have your spending that is variable. So it's the dining out, it's the groceries, fuel costs, toll costs, parking costs. Some of us have those. Kids items and supplies, things like that would be captured here in expenses. But then the next block is the emergency fund contribution. So you have to stop and look at the health of your emergency fund. If it's not at least at 1 month of expenses saved, when I say expenses, I mean like your non-negotiables. If it's not at least 1 month of that, that's getting a lot of attention. So you've seen me if you watch some of my prior examples, even here in the Millionaire in the Making series, like last week, we were doing both. We were multitasking the money. Like I love saying that. I love explaining that. I love emphasizing that because it's about, you can get after multiple goals at the same time. The short answer to your question is needs are met. You consider the health of your emergency fund, and then as much as possible going towards that credit card debt, like extra payments beyond the minimum. That's what block 3 is, extra payments beyond the minimum. This section is for high interest debt. Like that's what it was designed to serve. And namely, that's credit cards. That's often like what that is. Okay, that's a great question. That's really the question, right? Is if I have these 8 sections to distribute my funds into, how do I know? Like to what extent? How hard do I go across them? But that's where I think understanding each block's kind of milestones is super helpful. Your short-term goal, like your milestone with your emergency fund from the get-go, like when you're first starting out, is 1 month of expenses saved. you really kind of like are aggressive here until you reach that. And then we're looking at high interest debt. But I find, and when you see me do budget demos in the future, or if you look at some of my past ones, I will often be in both of these, giving a little bit of attention to the emergency fund so that we're not neglecting it. It needs to keep growing to reach that 1 month mark. But a lot is put here. It might be like 80-20 of the extra money that we have to put towards, because the extra debt, the credit cards are so high interest that they're going to really set you back very quickly because you're paying so much in interest with those high rates. All right, I think this is a good point to just kind of continue pulling us through. What are the other sections? What do I think about next? So investing and saving, we'll kind of talk about these at the same time. I kind of see these like level right there with each other. They're both super important, but the emphasis being that you're investing for your retirement and your future before you invest for your child. That's huge. So that's one big point of emphasis with how this was structured. Make sure that you're nurturing your future before you look at the 529s and the UTMAs and stuff like that. When we think about saving, a lot of us are probably saving for like multiple things at the same time. And so there might be a few lines. Might be, I've seen people with like 7 or 8 lines in this block on, they're like adding stuff together so they can fit it here, but really getting after multiple things at once. And that's fine. It's totally expected that you would have multiple buckets. And I always say your emergency fund is the most important bucket that you have. It gets its own section. It gets its own section right after needs are met. But as we come down, we have other buckets. So if you're a homeowner, home maintenance bucket, absolutely necessary. If you have a car maintenance bucket, absolutely necessary. You might have heard the term sinking funds. This is like it's the same concept. It is idea that you have these costs that you know are coming. Why not just like gradually save to meet those obligations? Like that would just be smart. And that way you're not trying to foot a huge bill. You got to get 4 new tires and you're like, what gives? Like, that's my entire paycheck. What? No, instead, you've got buckets set up and you simply pull from the bucket to cover the cost. I personally call them savings buckets, but a much more popular term in the finance community is sinking funds. So hopefully if you've heard that, you kind of like, it kind of clicks like, okay, I see what that is. Then we can shift into investing for our children. This is where I would put things like, giving to charity, supporting a cause, that you stand for. Those sorts of things would go here. When my son is in like a soccer league, or he's getting ready to start a baseball league in December, I'm going to put his league, the cost of like his gear and stuff like that in here. And it'll just be categorized as children. But it'll go right in here because that's an investment in him. You could make the argument that, we'll just like, it's an expense. Like go put that in like kids items or something. Go put that in variable spending. I could see that. But I do think it's more appropriate that stuff like that, like the summer camps and those sorts of things, that they're down here at the bottom. And 7 and 8 are your definition of wealth. What does that look like? Where are you devoting funds? What do you do? Do you travel? Are you pursuing like investing in real estate? Like these sorts of things, which that would actually probably go in investing. But looking at those things that, at least for block 7, everybody agrees in the household. Like this is something we all want to do. We all want to go to the zoo. Okay, my husband and I, we want to go on a date night. My husband and I, we want to renovate the kitchen. That would be this one. All stakeholders are saying, yes, let's put joint dollars to this. And then we close with individual spending money, fun money, happy dollars, whatever you want to call it. Each person getting that. So I got the question on some of my recent videos. I've been posting about like the 95% joint model and budgeting as a couple and how I love the 95% joint model. The 8-part budget is beautifully aligned with the 95%. It really was built for it. Because the idea is like blocks 1 through 7 are covered with your joint checking account where all your money landed. And then you have this equitable, okay, 50-50 of what's left goes towards the individual checking accounts. And this is for like hobbies. Okay, for my husband, it's like the graphics card, the Magic the Gathering, whatever it might be, judgment free. Like it's his account. I can't even see his personal account. I have no idea what he does with his fun money. I mean, he'll usually tell me like, or show me what he's been getting. So we kind of fill each other in. But it's a judgment-free zone. And the same is true for me if I want to get like crafting items. Like you probably don't need me to tell you this, but I love planners. I buy a lot of planner like stickers and accessories and things like that. I use this money for that. If I take a friend of mine to brunch, I use this money. In the beginning, when I was building this business, it was just like a baby blog, and I wanted to talk about finances and how I was starting to budget in a new way and how powerful and transformational it was. I was using fun money from here to build the business. It was very inexpensive at the start. I mean, it would be like $10 for this subscription, or like Bluehost, for example, to have a website. And then my sample planner when I first started was like $50. I would use this money for that because that's my personal business venture that if I go to my husband and I say, hey, like, should that go here? He probably would say yes because he's kind and would be like, sure, I don't mind. But for me, I see that as highly individual. It's my pursuit. It should come from my individual account. And the idea is that you're going to give every dollar a job to where this should be zero. And I want to bring back up like the whole piece of you follow this in order and like put the summer camps and things like this here in block 6 has a lot to do with the fact that because the 8-part budget is in order, if you need to cut things, if things were to go left and you needed to act fast and adjust your budget, like something's got to give. I don't want to pull from the emergency fund. Like what would I do otherwise? Or maybe I don't have an emergency fund. What do I do? You cut from the bottom up. So the first thing to go would be the personal spending money. This is why I don't transfer it on the first of the month. I let it sit there in the budget, which means it's sitting there in the checking account because I'm going to make sure I didn't forget any expenses. I know that we're on track. Right? That would be the first thing to go. And then, the date night or we all went to the water park, right? You would cut that out next. It's starting to make sense, right? Like, okay, yeah, well then I guess that makes sense. I would pull my son out of, soccer camp or what have you if things went left and we needed to cut, trim, slim down so that we can make things work. You wouldn't nourish the buckets maybe to the extent that you had planned on, or maybe you'd have to take all this away. You're cutting from the bottom up. That's the beauty of having a budget. If your budget's already in order, then yeah, if you need to in a crisis situation, or there's a bunch of bills that you forgot about that are pricey, you're cutting from the bottom up. So forgive me because I know that in this particular episode, things were a little all over the place. I'm showing you worksheets. I'm showing you the iPad. I'm giving you all these figures. But hopefully what shines through is that when this is how you budget, which this is our real budget from September 2018. That the power and what you're pouring into, I guess, your wealth potential. This is not going to reveal your wealth potential. And when I say wealth potential, I mean, how much can you invest comfortably? And I don't mean deprive yourself of everything so that you can invest as much as possible. No, like that's the FIRE movement. It's quite, I don't want to say restricted, but it's just like very, very like rigid, very extreme. I am more like, let's balance it out. When you budget like this, or even when you budget like this, cool. Like I was tracking my spending, awesome, but there was no order to it. It clearly wasn't goal-based, because if it were goal-based, it would be in order. The number one goal after needs being met would be nourish that emergency fund, right? The next goal being tackle the credit card debt. I want to emphasize too, and this is the last point I'll make, it's not one at a time. This is not like baby steps. I say that not to slam Dave Ramsey, no, that's not what I'm doing here. I don't believe I have to criticize somebody else to teach what I teach. The baby steps are one thing at a time. And I believe in multitasking your money. If we're talking like millionaire in the making, if you only focus on your emergency fund for 5 years, you have missed 5 years in the market. So it's multitasking those dollars so that you can accomplish a lot. And yes, I understand that you've got to have disposable income, like, a good bit of disposable income to spread it across the 8 sections. For that to be your reality, I understand, like, I get that. But once you're there, if you can achieve that, if you can unlock that, you have to have a comprehensive budget. It cannot just be a worksheet with like savings, wants, needs, or something like that, or baby steps. I'm sorry, but like if you have a lot of disposable income, the baby steps are not the best way, numbers wise and fulfillment wise, to go about this. You need a comprehensive system that puts all your goals on one page, and allows you to tackle multiple things at once. Okay, I know that was a lot. I told myself I wanted to keep this one at 30 minutes, and yet still somehow I'm at like 50. What last questions do we have? I'm going to scroll up, see if I missed any. Anything that's coming to mind? Okay, perfect. Do you make a plan at the beginning of the year on where you will be traveling? Generally, yes. Usually we're like 12 months out from where we're going to go, and then I start to craft a very high level budget, and kind of go from there. That's a good question. I try to be, 12 months out. I need help with organizing our budget. I feel so overwhelmed. I understand that. I definitely understand that. People approach budgeting with this idea of, I'm about to step into a cage. Oh my gosh, I don't want to step into a cage. And I would just encourage you, so much of this is your mindset. If you see this as a cage, it is a cage. You will hate it. You will resent it, and you'll stop doing it, and you'll wonder, like, why is my money a mess? It's because from like point 0 is, how do you see it? If you can transform your perception of a budget to being, I always say it's a bridge, it's not a cage. It's a bridge to investing more, which means you can retire earlier, you can build wealth to a greater degree, you can build generational wealth. But I know that organizing it can feel like a lot. I understand that. But I do stand by the homework that you have to do to build this. You kind of just got to do it once, and then it serves you, for months and years to come. Like, what are your bills? What are your debts? how much do you have in savings? It's the homework that a lot of people don't do, and it's why their budgets fail. They want to jump right at the spreadsheet and say like, okay, cool, let's build it. Let's fill it up. No, you don't have any idea what you typically spend in groceries for a 2-week period. Like you got to know your money. So I would encourage you, if it's overwhelming at first, just kind of sit back. Don't look at the spreadsheets or the planners just yet. It's more so about, what is my money? What does it look like? That awareness makes the budget so much easier and so much more approachable. What's the best way to get in contact with you? I love your content. Thank you so much. I appreciate that, Dapper. Yes, so if you want to shoot me a DM, I do read all of my DMs. Sometimes I get behind, but I do read every single one, I promise. So shoot me a note. Here's what we'll do as a last thing. I will offer up a copy, like I've been doing, of the Google Sheet here live. So let me drop a comment here on the live. It's going to be a word. Okay. I dropped a word in the comments. DM me that word to enter to win a copy of this spreadsheet. I've been doing this every week in this series. I think it's good to keep up. I think I'm going to slim down to just this one giveaway so that it's not confusing between the other one I was trying to do with the gift card. We'll just do the spreadsheet each week. I'll find another way to incorporate other giveaways. But for now, we'll do this. So look for that word. DM me that word by, usually I give it about 4 hours. And you enter to win. Okay, awesome. All right, y'all, that is my time. Thank you for tuning in. This was fun. Thanks. Makes me want to look at my evolution of budgets. Yeah, for sure. Go back and be like, what was I doing? What did we manage to accomplish? It's also very, I don't know, it's motivating to see that your journey has improved, that you're doing better things. I hope to see you all next week. And thank you again. Bye.